Another thing that kind of came up during that call, which is actually good feedback, I think, for people who are looking for team members or looking for people to join their team, is to the best of your ability, be upfront with the timing of the process. So let's say the job
Mhm.
closes on July 15th, just making that up, right? And then say you can expect a response in this amount of time, right? Whether it's yay or nay, or if you're moving on to the next stage, this is the process it's going to be. We expect to have a decision by this time. Now, that takes some pre-planning. That also takes the right amount of resources to be able to follow through with that timeline. But at least now your applicants know that there is a process and they're not just throwing things out into the ether and hoping for something to come back.
Tired of outdated systems holding your attraction back?
Gatemaster believes technology is part of the experience, transforming every touchpoint into an opportunity.
Imagine seamless online booking, effortless mobile ordering, and data-driven insights at your fingertips.
Ready to revolutionize your guest journey and maximize revenue?
Power your attraction with Gatemaster.
Discover the future at gatemaster.com.
Welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast, where we discuss the latest trends and challenges facing the attractions industry today.
We chat with some of the top leaders in the field and provide resources that will help develop your career in this great industry.
I am Josh Liebman. I am obsessed with the guest experience and helping attractions make that their top priority for success.
And I'm Matt Heller. I am passionate about organizational effectiveness, leadership development, and employee engagement.
Now sit upright, hold on tight, and get ready for the Attraction Pros podcast.
Hey, Josh, how are you?
Hey, Matt, I'm doing well. How are you?
I am fantastic.
All right. That was a good one. I mean, they're all
Thank
good
you.
ones, but it was particularly good. Yeah.
I practiced that one.
All right.
Yeah. Every other time we've done a podcast, I've practiced it. But I have a question for you.
Yes.
Do you remember the last time that you applied for and interviewed for a job?
Applied for, interviewed, and got a job, or just applied for and interviewed in general?
Well, either one. The process.
The process. Uh, the last time I applied for and interviewed for a job was during COVID.
Okay.
So 2020. The last time, because I was thinking about this recently, the last time that I applied for a job, like just through the traditional ways of applying for a job, got the interview, and then got the job was 2008.
Okay. How was that process?
In 2008?
Yeah. Yeah. Like, do you remember
Uh,
anything good or bad about the process?
well, now that I think about it, I didn't even get the job that I applied for. I was kind of given a consolation prize, but it was still the process of applying for a job is arduous. Like, let's just get right to it, right? I mean, applying for a job can feel like a full-time job. And I I think the software these days, there's been a lot of improvements to it, but it still feels like very behind. Like, upload your resume and now fill out all of these criteria forms that are exactly what you put in your resume, and then send this to your LinkedIn profile, which should have all the information that you've got on your resume. And then it's probably going to go through a filter where it's looking for keywords, and you're probably not going to get a call back anyway in most cases. That's how I felt in 2020. In 2023, I think I may have applied for a handful of jobs, but I don't think it was very many. I didn't put that much effort into it because thankfully I was able to get some quick wins with some clients. That of course then led to more wins with more clients, and now I feel very grateful that I'm in a place that I don't need to be applying for jobs right now because the business is sustaining itself. But I do empathize with those who are in a state of continuously applying for jobs and feeling like that is their whole life, especially when vast majority of applications feel like they're just hitting dead ends.
Right, right. Well, and I was thinking about this too. And the last time I actually applied for a job, interviewed for it, and got it was 2003
Oh, you beat me.
when when I got a job at Universal. Now, in both of what we do, when we're interviewing with clients, so to speak, we're kind of interviewing there as well. We're kind of presenting ourselves and this is how we can benefit the company and all those type of things. But it's not the traditional job seeking interview process application that we've, kind of come to know.
Right.
And the reason I ask is because as you know, in the industry, we've recently had some reductions in workforce from a very large company. We all know which one it is, but there's also other companies that are kind of reducing their workforce, and we thought that there was something we should do about that in order to help some of the people that were recently laid off. So, a gentleman named Frank James and I put together a couple of resources. We did a sort of a support call where people could just join the Zoom call and vent or cry or whatever they wanted to do and talk about their journey. But then we also did 2 virtual job fairs. Now, neither one of us had done a virtual job fair before, but we've done real job fairs. And so we tried to set it up like that, where we invited as many recruiters and people that have jobs to offer to come be part of this call. And then anybody that is seeking a job could also be part of the call. And we did that earlier this week at the time of this recording, and they were both very, very successful. But what we got out of it was something very unexpected, because toward the end of the call, we kind of got into this organic Q&A, right? And so you've got the job seekers asking the recruiters questions and vice versa. And it just became a really organic discussion about the kind of the current state of the job application process. And so I thought it would be good, since we are talking to, on this podcast, a lot of people who are building their careers, maybe people who are in that job seeking process. I thought it'd be interesting to kind of go over some of those points from the Q&A, just to kind of give some more resources to folks out there. So what do you say we jump in?
I love it. Let's do it.
All right. All right. So the first thing I want to talk a little bit about is the resume itself. And one of the things that I've actually started doing was, when people ask me for tips on the resume, what I do is I take the text and I put it into ChatGPT. And I say, let's look for any formatting issues, anything that we can do to strengthen the wording of some of the bullet points. And what was interesting is we got very similar and probably even more robust input from the recruiters that I got from ChatGPT. So one of the things that a lot of the recruiters talked about was, in those bullet points, make sure that you are kind of telling a story. So you're not just reiterating what's on the job description, but you're telling what kind of impact you've made. So for example, if you were overseeing X number of people, how did you make that situation better? What were the measurables that you affected during the time that you were there? Again, not just kind of reiterating what's on the job description, because anybody can read that. So ChatGPT, but also the recruiters gave us some really good advice about how to strengthen that piece of it, not only so that it would show up in the applicant tracking systems better, but also when people are reading them, when humans have eyeballs on these resumes, that they're seeing, oh, this is what that person did. They also kind of reiterated that when a cover letter is requested, that this is really the gateway to the resume, and then the resume is really the gateway to the interview. So it's important that all the things align, but are not repeated or redundant.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really important.
It is important, and I'm glad that you brought up AI and ChatGPT, because I think that could be a really powerful tool that we now have at our fingertips to be able to help us build or refine our resume. And I think it's important to note the distinction, and you did, in the way that you talked about how to use it, of having AI be able to support you rather than having AI build your resume. And you should be doing kind of the first draft at it, and then upload it and say, how can I make this better? How can I improve upon this? Or what questions should I be asking to be able to make those continual enhancements on it, rather than, here's my LinkedIn page, build me a resume, and then going from there. So kind of making sure you're doing it in the right order, and using AI to review your work, not to do the work on your behalf, especially if you're doing something important like applying for a job, where you will
Exactly.
then be doing work.
Yeah, so I think you have a great point there. Let it review your work, not do your work.
Mhm.
And I actually had an experience where somebody had used ChatGPT to help write a blog post. And this is a person I know really, really well. And he asked me to review it. And I said, this doesn't sound like you. And even before I knew he used ChatGPT, I said, this does not sound like your voice. So I think that's also really important on the cover letter, on an email that you might send. You could, use AI to make this really beautiful, professional sounding email. But if it doesn't sound like you, then that's not going to be telling an authentic story to the recruiter. So I think that's another important point to think about. Are you showing yourself during this? Are
Mhm.
you, kind of showing your personality? Because everybody's different. And that's another one of the
Yeah.
things that the recruiters talked about was that they don't want to see the same cookie cutter resume from everybody, right? And again, that goes back to not using the things that are on the job description, but to allow yourself to put a little personality in there so that they get a sense of who you are. Because the unfortunate truth is, the only thing that they have to go on is what they see on that piece of paper or on the computer screen. Some will go to LinkedIn potentially and look at your profile and maybe do a little bit of extra research, but they've never talked to you, most likely, right? They've never heard your voice. They've never heard the inflection of your voice. They've never seen you interact with a guest or a team member. So all they have to go on are a couple of pieces of paper or what they see online.
Mhm. Now, when we talk about being personal and going back to you said, telling your story, but also doing it in a way that's concise and that a resume, I've heard some best practices say a resume should be no more than one page, but maybe it's 1 to 2 pages if you've got a very long storied career behind you. How do you tell that story in the bullet point fashion that allows the personality to come through, but also getting the meat of the resume across that then doesn't get filtered through the automatic scanners and kind of made redundant, put in the pile, but really shows that it needs to be elevated.
That's a really great question. I think what I heard from the recruiters a lot was you've got to be able to show what you've done, show what you've accomplished, and then it kind of goes back to that person that made the blog post that didn't sound like them. Then go back and tweak. And I know what you said. Yes, sometimes applying for a lot of jobs can feel like a full-time job, and maybe right now it is. Finding the right next adventure for you could be your full-time job right now. And so it makes sense to really look at that resume, look at those bullet points, take a look at your cover letter. Does it reflect who you are as a person? I had a conversation this morning with somebody and we were talking about using humor. And that's something you want to be very careful of. But also allowing your personality come through, maybe with a sentence here or there, or showing how much you love the industry, and maybe using some descriptive words in terms of how enthusiastic you are and those type of things. But I think it really comes down to, is that resume reflecting who you are? And I think one of the best practices for that is to let somebody else see it. So
Hmm.
if somebody that is looking at that, a spouse, a partner, a best friend, and they say, meh, like you said on things, they're like, okay, so what? Then you haven't captured kind of who you are. So maybe go back, tweak some of those words, make it maybe a little bit more personal in the cover letter or the words that you're using on the resume. And I know I'm being a little ambiguous, but this whole process is a little ambiguous. And so when you look at it, I think you'll know. When your friends look at it, they'll know this is reflecting who you are.
Now, let me ask this. What do you think is more important, your resume or your network?
Your network. 1000%. And that was actually brought up on the call as well. So nurturing your network, and you and I have talked about networking quite a bit.
Hmm.
And it was interesting because a lot of the things that ended up being discussed and asked about really came back to your network. And so, for example, if you are in the job hunt right now, one of the best things you can do is, look out for your friends. What jobs are they looking for? Post something for them or tag them in a job that they think is good for them, because they're probably going to be doing it for you, or they're more likely to
Hmm.
do the reciprocal for you if they see something that is kind of up your alley. So absolutely, I think the network is incredibly important. And they also talked about that a little bit on the call as well. So let's say that you are applying for a job at X company, right? And you happen to know somebody at that company. Even the recruiter said, call that person. Let them know that your application's coming through. Because the recruiter said, hey, if Josh works for our company and Josh comes to me in HR or the recruiting department and says, hey, watch out for Matt's application or his resume, it's coming through. That resume and that application is going to get a quicker glance than somebody who they don't know from
Right.
that's a stranger. So absolutely that network is critical.
I would also even take that and expand on it and say this is an opportunity to, yes, use your existing network, but also to be continually building your network as well. And in 2025, we have the ability to make connections much quicker than we used to prior to 15, 20 years ago. To add some context to that, I was recently speaking with a young professional who um, her position is going to be eliminated at the end of this season. So she's kind of on the lookout on the job hunt and found a job at a comparable type of location within her geographic region that she wouldn't need to relocate, and it would be upward mobility for her. And she applied for the job, and we were talking, and she said, you know what? And I even did a little bit of sleuthing, and I found the recruiting manager on LinkedIn. And I said, well, did you reach out? And she said, well, no, I didn't want to. And I said, what if you just send a message and just say, hey, just letting you know, I applied for this job. This is my current situation. I'm very interested in it, and feel free to, let me know if we have an opportunity to chat. From that, she got an interview because it already set her resume apart. Yeah, her resume was strong enough as it was. It's possible that there were other people who had just as strong, if not a stronger resume that were going through the same process that she was. But because she reached out to that recruiter and was able to make that immediate connection, she was able to network her way into the interview that I think is stronger than the traditional application process.
Absolutely. And that actually echoes something that was said again on the call. And it was our friend Denise Beckson from Warriors Peers. And she said, be politely assertive, right?
I like
And
that.
this was in a couple of different contexts. So to your point, if you know or are trying to connect with someone that might be at that or that is at that company and you can connect with them, just like you said in that story, it could lead to a great connection and potentially an interview. But also, for example, if you're following up, let's say you did, put in your application, you put in your resume, and you haven't heard anything, and it's been a couple of weeks, follow up. And that was the recruiter's advice. Follow up because as
Hmm.
much as they really try to not ghost, I know a lot of people say, well, recruiters are ghosting us and we're not hearing back and things like that. For the people that were on this call, they were like, we do everything in our power to make sure that doesn't happen. But they said, realistically, do some people fall through the cracks? Unfortunately, yes. However, that is never their intent. It's never their intent to just let people kind of waffle and not know what the status of their application is. But if you feel like you have been waiting longer than you thought, politely but assertively follow up. Hey,
Hmm.
we interviewed or I sent my application in and I just wanted to check on the status, would love to know where things are in the process,
Yeah.
but you're showing your enthusiasm. And that's the other thing that they said is when they don't hear from people, sometimes it's like, well, are they really interested? Or are they just clicking the button on Indeed on as many jobs as they can versus going to the company website, applying that way, and then, oh, by the way, showing that you actually want that job by following up and saying, I'd like to know what the process is from here.
Yeah. It is, when early in my career, my parents taught me the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And I like what did Denise say? Politely assertive.
Yes.
And it's kind of knowing the difference between being aggressively persistent or being responsibly persistent, I should say. And then to the point of nagging. If you're making multiple communications every single day, then I'd be like, whoa, slow down. Like we'll get to you when we get to you, but that, maybe once a week, follow up or that check-in shows that you are genuinely interested and that you're being persistent about wanting to at least get to understand what the next steps might be.
Absolutely. Well, and then another thing that kind of came up during that call, which is actually good feedback, I think, for people who are looking for team members or looking for people to join their team, is to the best of your ability, be upfront with the timing of the process. So let's say the job
Mhm.
closes on July 15th, just making that up, right? And then say you can expect a response in this amount of time, right? Whether it's yay or nay, or if you're moving on to the next stage, this is the process it's going to be. We expect to have a decision by this time. Now, that takes some pre-planning. That also takes the right amount of resources to be able to follow through with that timeline. But at least now your applicants know that there is a process and they're not just throwing things out into the ether and hoping for something to come back.
Yeah, yeah. I think the more transparency, the better in terms of what that process looks like, what that potential candidate could expect from the application process. I, is just it comes down to respect.
Yeah.
Respecting their time and the fact that they are actively seeking for a job and probably in a very stressful time in their lives, and at least a no is better than nothing.
Oh, absolutely.
And you and I both know that from running our businesses and doing sales, essentially, that I would much rather hear from a potential client of we're not moving forward right now, we don't have it in the budget this year, rather than completely cutting off all communication and letting me to continue to wonder and to hope and to could this possibly happen, except not hearing back whatsoever. So that a no is the probably the second best thing you can tell to a job applicant.
Of course, the first best is you're moving on in the process, right?
Yes,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. Thought that was implied, but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Just clarifying.
yeah.
One more thing on the resume that came from the recruiters is, and again, this goes back to the time that we spend to apply, is that to customize each resume for that particular job. There was actually a gentleman on the call that I got to speak to, and he said, I've applied for all these different jobs. But he said, I've sent the same, pretty much same cover letter, same resume
Hmm.
to each one of them, and they all have variances in what those jobs are and what the responsibilities are. And so it was funny because this was kind of between the breakout rooms that we were doing. And shortly after that, the recruiters came back and said, best practice is to customize your resume. Look at that job, look at the company. Make sure that it reflects really the goals and values of that company, so that you can show that you can kind of fit in and assimilate to that culture, if you will. So absolutely customize your resumes and cover letters.
And I think that there's a little bit of a mindset shift with this too, because you talked about there's that applicant who's going on Indeed and hitting
Yeah.
apply to every single job, right? And then very similarly, here's someone who's sending the exact same cover letter, the exact same resume. I think that yes, it's helpful for the employer, and I think it's also helpful for the applicant as well, because it helps if you're looking at saying like, all right, here are all the jobs available in the industry, and you're doing the spray and pray method, right? You're just kind of casting the line out there and and seeing what catches. I think in the interest of, like we mentioned, applying for jobs can feel like a full-time job. This helps to direct your own efforts towards, do I want to take the time to tweak my resume and tweak my cover letter to apply for this job? If yes, it's worth pursuing. If no, maybe save your own time and the potential recruiter's time of looking through it and say, you know what, somebody else is going to be more passionate about this position than I am.
Well, and that also, to me, brings up the fact that as you are interviewing and you're putting yourself out there, that you should be interviewing that company as much as they're interviewing you. So,
Hmm.
is this going to be a right fit? Are you seeing red flags in the process? Again, the gentleman I spoke to this morning said that he had to go through 8 interviews for a job that ultimately he didn't get. So, all that
Uh,
time that he spent doing that, I mean, what a soul-crushing experience, you know? So if that experience is not like making you feel warm and fuzzy and comfortable and like you're going to fit in and the person you're interacting with has you have a good camaraderie and a good rapport and there's just things that feel off, that's okay. Like that may
Hmm.
be giving you an indication of what this role or this company is going to be all about. And we both know that not everybody fits in every company, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Like to find your next great adventure, you may have to, find a needle in a haystack. And I know financially that can be difficult for some people, but it's also something that is, I think, worth their while.
I've actually walked out of a job interview before.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, so it was a long time ago. And I made it through the first round of interview, and I will also say that this was not in our industry. So I was building my business within the industry, but needed something to hopefully keep the income flowing, a little bit to go. So I made it to the first round of interview, and then the next round was a job shadow, and so I was working with a team member. Who was like a little bit more seasoned um and was seeing what the job was like. And I think it was, scheduled for, I don't know, it was like 6 hours, 8 hours or whatever it was. And a couple hours into it, I said, hey, I'm really glad that I had the opportunity to shadow you today. They said, oh, that's great. I'm glad too. And I said, because it really let me understand that I don't want this job. And I said it, in a very I said that this position is not for me.
Yeah.
Uh, that okay, like, do you want to continue the day? No, I'm not going to waste either of our time, right? I'm not going to waste your time in showing me around, showing me the ropes. I'm going to let you get back to work and do your job, and I'm gonna go back home and I'm just gonna hit up a need again, right, and see what else I can look for. And I think that I think if you do that in a respectful manner, like you said, you're interviewing the company as much as they're interviewing you, and to say, hey, if I got this job, would I be happy? I don't think so. Would I be a great employee? Would I be really serving the organization in the best way? Probably not, as enthusiastically as I would if I was with another company.
Absolutely. And I remember when I first started at Universal, the last job I actually interviewed for, I remember going through the orientation and there was this sense of this is how we run as a company, so it was very interactive, it was very fun, there was a lot of movie references and things of that nature. And as I got into HR and in the training department, they said that's very intentional. Like we want to give people an
Mhm.
idea of what it's like to work here, what the culture is like, and they can make the decision. Like this may not be for them. Like I know we talk about group interviews and things like that. And if
Yeah.
somebody goes through a group interview and says, "This is not for me," that's the best time for them to say it, right?
Yeah. Best time for both parties.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so as I've helped other companies deliver their orientations, that's always been in my mind. Like try to make this as much like the employee experience as you can so that people will get an understanding of what it's like to work here so that they can make that choice. Because again, better to make that choice there than 6 months down the road, or they don't make that choice and they notice that this is not for them, but they're staying because of the money, and then they're not performing at a high level, and all the bad things happen, right? So yeah, so there's a couple other things that I wanted to touch on. Number one was when people talk about, especially maybe leaving one industry and going to another, sometimes it's difficult for them to really wrap their head around the fact that, hey, I worked in ride operations or I worked at a water park and now I'm applying in a different industry. Well, the skills that you learn in the industry absolutely transfer to other industries, and that may be a closely related industry such as hotels or cruise lines or things of that nature. But just think about what you did from a leadership perspective. There's people everywhere, right? So if you can highlight on that resume to the new company what you did and how many people you oversaw and what you did to improve morale or the employee experience, and then what you did to improve productivity or how you impacted the sales of the company. Those are things that all companies, all industries are really concerned with. So if you're, I'm just going to throw out a couple, if you're working in a water park, right? And obviously safety is number one, right? No drownings at a water park. If you're going to go and you're going to work on the assembly line of a car manufacturing plant, safety is number one, right? So absolutely transferable. So sometimes it's the exercise of not thinking about the industry, but thinking about those skills that you have that can be used in any industry.
And I think going back to telling that story towards the beginning, I think this brings a heightened importance of, if we're going to continue on the same kind of example right here, if that, assembly line supervisor doesn't know the water park industry, they might see that as just like, oh, that's just people having fun. That's just lifeguarding. That's, how can you, demonstrate safety here? So and I say that as that's very real, as most people outside our industry do not know the significant impact of the level of work that we do in our industry with safety and with so many other areas of the operation. So being able to say, I managed safety at a water park, hopefully is actually not top of mind for people in other industries because it's so well embedded. And so to be able to kind of look under the hood a little bit and say, these are the things that we focused on, and this is how I would bring that to this organization. Maybe it's not high school lifeguards that we're talking about here, but swap out just the nuances of it and just bring in now the new specifics. But conceptually, here are my principles, here are the standards that I enforce, here are the things that I'm passionate about and extremely diligent with, and here's how they transfer over.
Well, and I think that also takes a little bit of research if you don't know what it's like to work in that other industry to try to find out, right? So yes, you can write down that those skills are transferable, but what is it that you would be doing, to your point, in that new industry that absolutely puts those skills to use so that then during the interview, if you get that far, then you can verbally tell the story of, well, this is what I did at the water park, and I can totally see myself doing something very, very similar here. We had an outstanding safety record, and it was because we did this, this, and this with the employees, and we really built a safety culture. Well, I don't know what manufacturing plant wouldn't want a great safety culture. So, understanding where they're coming from, I think is important.
And then probably finding the parallels and the through lines. So
Yeah.
leaning into the same example of just say, like, I know OSHA front to back. I know the ASTM standards, front to back. Do I know the person? No, I do not. But to say in that particular, they might say, oh, we've got this level of proficiency. Yeah, they came from another industry, but it's at the end of the day, it's all the same. And being able to communicate that.
Yeah. So I'm curious from your standpoint, because earlier you mentioned networking and what's more important, your network or your resume. So if you put your job seeker networking hat on, what do you think are some of the important things that people should be keeping in mind as they're seeking jobs and the networking process?
Here's the biggest thing that I think it is something that's really important to recognize if you are in a position where maybe you were with your organization for many years and you were let go, or you're very passionate about the employer that you had or has. This relates to if you're looking for a job or if you have a job, regardless, your employer is not your identity. And if you lose a job, it can feel like losing part of your identity, especially if you've put your heart and soul into an organization and then had it taken away. You can feel lost. But when you look at saying, okay, what did I do for this organization? Then saying, well, what am I? Who am I specifically? And you can categorize it specifically as saying, like, I am marketing rather than I am X organization that I work for or worked for in the past. And then being able to say, this is not only what I'm passionate about, not only proficient about, but this is something that I can actually wrap my identity around. And now, when I post on LinkedIn, I'm not going to say I'm looking for a job in marketing. I used to do this, etc. I now am going to turn that into thought leadership, which attracts attention towards that, not because I did this or I'm doing this for another company, but this is my lane. This is my mind share. So the topic of mind share, or the definition really is about like owning a topic or niche in the minds of those around you, of those within your industry. So if you think of to say, well, what's my mind share? Now that ties into your identity, and now that has nothing to do with your employer. It has nothing to do with what it says on your business card or what it used to say on your business card. Now it is specifically, it is the transferable skills that can be transferred within the industry or outside the industry and allows you to, I would say, beat those resume filter software to then really shine above and then get sought out towards those specific positions or those roles that align with who you are as an individual.
Absolutely. That's great. I love that. I love that because what it gets me thinking about is what is your brand? What is your reputation? How do people see you? And if you
Mhm.
are, putting thought leadership pieces out there or writing articles or whatever you might be doing that is getting in the minds of potential employers. Oh, I saw a resume from Josh and he did a great piece on the hospitality mentality. Wonderful, like that's who we're looking for, right? And so you start to build that in people maybe that you don't know or strengthen that with people that you do know. It also reminded me of something that was discussed on the original support call that Frank and I did, and it was a recruiter, and she said, when you're in this situation, you really have an opportunity because so much of what you may have done was, and your identity, to your point, was tied up potentially in that other company and even the industry. So many of us fell into this industry accidentally. Did we fall in love? Absolutely. But we feel like this is the only industry for us. And for some people, it may be. But one of the things that this particular recruiter said was, she said, ask yourself two questions. She said, what do I like to do? Right? So that's the first bit, right? What is it about this that I like? What do I like to do? And then the second question is, what do I want to do more of? And so maybe those are similar answers, but if you then go back and say, okay, I was in operations at a theme park. What did I like to do? I really liked interacting with my team. Great. I really liked guest experience and looking at that. Great. What do you want to do more of? I really like to plan events. I really like to plan for the next thing coming and the next thing coming and the next thing coming. So that's what I'd like to do more of. Well, can you oversee a positive team and focus on guest experience and plan events in other industries besides theme parks? Absolutely. So that's where it kind of ties into what you were saying. Like, don't be so tied into the company or the industry. Find those things that really make you feel alive, and you might find that you can go to another industry and thrive. And maybe you do come back to the attractions industry when the timing is right. But don't allow that to be a roadblock to you finding a really great opportunity.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. I've done that before. I detoured into hotels and resorts while at the same time kind of keeping one foot in the attraction space, and was able to really come back with a little bit of a refined perspective of the industry and the areas that I'm passionate about. So I
Yeah.
second that 100%.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I have one last tip that I was just looking at my notes about, and I kind of referred to it a minute ago. But a lot of people, as we said, will kind of go to Indeed and they'll hit apply, apply, apply. And what the recruiters had said was that if your resume and application comes in through the company website versus Indeed, most of the time it's going to have more complete information because they've said that they've gotten things through Indeed where they didn't even have contact information for the
Jeez.
person. So if you had a great looking resume, but people can't contact you, then the resume doesn't matter.
And
So
then you think you're getting ghosted, but you're not.
exactly, exactly. So go to the company website. Most of them are going to have a spot where you can submit your resume or apply for different positions. And the recruiter said this is where we get more accurate information, and so that's the information they tend to go to more often. And then, as a filter, then they'll go to Indeed as well.
And I would say if you hear that and you say, well, now I need to search every single company individually, think of it as looking for a hotel on Expedia. You see all the different options, and then you go to the hotel's website and you book direct because you found that price in that location on Expedia. So that's
Yeah.
kind of my immediate correlation of saying, like, okay, you can still see all the options, but then you can still make the direct application.
But it also ties into something we said a minute ago where you want to know something about that particular company, right? And that particular park. So even if you're applying for something else in the theme park industry, maybe you haven't been to that park, or maybe you've never,
Mhm.
you don't know much about them. So go to their website, check it out, see what they're all about. And you may even make the decision then if you go to their website and their website's clunky and it's not up to date, and you're like, that could be a red flag. Like, is this a company that I want to work for? Should I bother giving them my resume?
If they're hiring a web designer and that's what you're applying for.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, so Josh, thank you for kind of allowing this conversation about job searching and resumes. I hope it's been helpful for everybody out there who's watching and listening.
Yeah, I hope it was helpful too, and I appreciate just all that you're doing just in the space to be able to help the industry. And it's definitely something, you and I are both very passionate about career development within the industry, and I hope that this is nothing more than a blip on the radar for many people, and that by this time next year, or if not even sooner than that, then we're celebrating the job growth and the amount of companies that are hiring and the amount of amazing people who might be struggling today of looking back on this. And we're thankful for all the efforts that they were doing during this time to get them to their next step.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if there's anything that Josh or I can do, please feel free to reach out to us on the socials, or you can email us at attractionpros@gmail.com. More than happy to help make connections or give advice or whatever we can do to help. And so for everybody out there who's watching and listening, thank you for being here. And just remember, we are all attraction pros.